You know that moment, that subtle shift in the room you can't quite explain. Conversations stop when you walk in. Someone avoids eye contact, and then, eventually, it reaches you. Quietly, indirectly, almost accidentally. Someone you trusted has been talking about you behind your back, and the feeling is instant. A drop in your stomach, heat in your face, that strange mix of embarrassment and disbelief. Because it's not just that they said something negative, it's who said it. Someone you laughed with, confided in, maybe even defended. What makes this experience so uniquely painful isn't criticism, it's betrayal. If a stranger judges you, it stings. But when someone inside your circle does it, your brain reads it as something deeper. I wasn't safe where I thought I was safe. That's why people often replay the discovery over and over. Who else knows? What exactly did they say? Was any of it true? The mind scrambles, trying to repair a fracture in trust that happened out of sight. But here's the crucial shift most people never make. The real psychological question in this moment isn't, why would they say that about me? It's what kind of psychology makes someone talk about another person this way when they're not present. Because people don't talk behind others' backs randomly. They do it for reasons, psychological ones. And understanding those reasons doesn't just protect you from taking it personally. It reveals something far more important. When someone repeatedly talks about others behind their backs, they're showing you far more about their inner world than about the person they're discussing. And once you see that clearly, the shock begins to change shape. It stops being just pain and starts becoming insight. Before we talk about insecurity, envy, or personality, we need to start with something more uncomfortable and more honest. Humans talk about people who aren't present. All of us. It's easy to think of gossip as a flaw in certain individuals. But from a psychological and evolutionary perspective, talking about absent others is actually a deeply human behavior. For most of our history, survival depended on knowing who could be trusted, who cooperated, who cheated, who threatened the group. Reputation wasn't social drama, it was safety information. So our brains evolved to track people, to discuss people, to evaluate people when they're not there. That's why conversations about others feel so magnetic. Why attention sharpens when someone says, "Did you hear what happened with?" The mind automatically tunes in, because socially relevant information has always mattered. But here's where things shift. There's a psychological difference between information sharing and character-degrading gossip, between discussing behavior and attacking identity, between concern and contempt. Healthy social talk sounds like, "Hey, just be careful, he's been unreliable lately." Destructive gossip sounds like, "She's fake, he's pathetic, you can't trust anything about him." Same human wiring, very different motives. So when someone consistently talks behind others' backs, it's not simply because humans are wired this way. The wiring explains why the behavior exists. But the tone, the frequency, and the malice reveal something else entirely: the psychology of the person speaking. And that's where we begin to see the difference between normal social behavior and chronic backtalking. If you strip gossip down to its psychological core, past the social habits, past the personality labels, one pattern shows up again and again: fragile self-worth. People who repeatedly talk behind others' backs are very often struggling with how they see themselves. Not in obvious ways, many appear confident, social, even charismatic, but internally, their self-esteem is unstable. It rises and falls depending on comparison. And comparison is the key word here. In psychology, there's a well-documented process called downward comparison. When someone feels inadequate, threatened, or insecure, one fast way to feel better is to mentally place someone else below them. If I can see you as less attractive, less competent, less respected, I temporarily feel more secure in my own position. Most people do this occasionally, silently, inside their own thoughts. Chronic gossipers do it out loud. When they say, "She's not that talented, he's fake. She only got that job because of connections." They're not just describing you, they're repairing themselves. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Some people don't know how to elevate themselves internally. They were never taught stable self-worth, the kind that isn't dependent on being better than someone else. So instead, they use the only method that works quickly, lowering another person's image. Psychologically, it functions like a lift. If they can push someone down in social perception, they feel themselves rise. But the lift is temporary. That's why the behavior repeats. Why certain individuals always seem to have someone new to criticize. Why conversations with them often circle back to judging, comparing, dissecting other people's flaws. It's not random negativity, it's regulation. Their nervous system settles when hierarchy feels restored. So when someone consistently talks behind others' backs, what you're often witnessing isn't cruelty for its own sake. It's insecurity looking for relief. They don't rise by growing, they rise by lowering someone else. Not all gossip comes from low self-esteem alone. Sometimes it comes from something sharper and harder for people to admit. Envy. Envy is one of the most socially unacceptable emotions in Western culture. People will admit anger, jealousy, even resentment. But envy carries a deeper implication. You have something I want, and I hate that you have it. So instead of acknowledging it, many people convert envy into criticism. Psychologically, this often happens when someone experiences status threat. Your presence, your success, your relationships, your confidence, even just the way others respond to you, can activate comparison in someone who measures worth socially. And once comparison is triggered, the mind looks for balance. If they can't rise to your level, they reduce your level. So the gossip begins to sound like, "She's not that impressive. He just got lucky. She thinks she's better than everyone." Notice what's happening underneath. Your competence becomes arrogance. Your visibility becomes attention-seeking. Your independence becomes coldness. Qualities that elevate you are reframed as flaws. This isn't random distortion, it's psychological equalizing. Research on social comparison shows that when someone encounters a peer who highlights their own perceived shortcomings, it can create identity discomfort. And for people with fragile or competitive self-worth, one way to relieve that discomfort is reputational correction, altering how others see you so the gap feels smaller. So when someone talks behind your back, especially after you've grown, succeeded, or simply stood out, it's often not because you did something wrong. It's because your existence landed in their mind as comparison. And in that moment, you stopped being just a person and became competition. There's another psychological layer to gossip that has less to do with insecurity or envy and more to do with connection. For some people, talking about others is a shortcut to intimacy. Shared negativity creates a fast sense of alliance. When two people discuss a third person critically, even subtly, it produces an unspoken dynamic. We're on the same side. That feeling of alignment can be socially rewarding, especially for individuals who crave belonging or attention, but don't know how to create closeness in healthier ways. In social psychology, this is sometimes described as coalition bonding, forming connection through a shared target. Instead of building closeness through mutual vulnerability, humor, or shared values, the bond is built through comparison and judgment. That's why gossip often feels magnetic in conversation. The moment someone leans in and says, "Okay, don't repeat this, but..." attention sharpens. You've been invited into a circle. You now share information about someone who isn't present. And here's the part many people overlook. If someone habitually talks about others this way with you, they are almost certainly talking about you this way with others. Because in this dynamic, the content isn't the point. The social currency is. The story, the critique, the secret, these are simply tools to purchase relevance, attention, and alliance in the moment. The person being discussed is interchangeable, so when someone repeatedly gossips, what they're often revealing isn't just opinion about others, but a reliance on reputation trading as their primary way of connecting. And connection built on someone else's absence is rarely stable. Not everyone who talks behind others' backs is driven by the same psychology. The behavior may look similar on the surface, criticism in absence, but the internal motives can differ in important ways. Over time, certain patterns show up again and again. And understanding these patterns helps you see gossip not as random negativity, but as a predictable psychological strategy. Here are 4 common types. 1. The insecure self-soother. This person uses gossip to regulate self-doubt. When they feel inadequate, threatened, or less than, they restore balance by lowering someone else's image. Their comments often minimize others' abilities or question their authenticity. She's not that talented, he's kind of fake. The goal isn't really to harm you, it's to calm themselves. Criticizing others temporarily stabilizes their fragile self-worth. 2. The envious comparator. With this type, your presence activates comparison. Something about you highlights what they feel they lack. Success, attention, attractiveness, confidence, social ease. Instead of processing envy directly, they reinterpret your strengths as flaws. She thinks she's better than everyone. He just got lucky. Gossip becomes a way to psychologically shrink the gap between you and them. 3. The social status seeker. For this person, gossip is performance. Information about others, especially secrets or critiques, becomes attention currency. They share it to stay relevant in conversations, to feel central, informed, or socially valuable. You'll often notice that their stories shift depending on the audience. Accuracy matters less than impact. The goal is visibility, being the one who knows, who tells, who entertains. 4. The manipulative smearer. This is the most intentional form. Here, gossip is strategic. The person selectively spreads doubt, insinuation, or negative framing to influence how others perceive someone. This can happen in competitive environments, strained relationships, or power dynamics. The aim isn't just self-soothing or attention, as it's reputational control. If others question you, your influence weakens. These types aren't rigid categories. People can move between them depending on context and insecurity level. But across all 4, one theme repeats. The conversation isn't really about the absent person. It's about the psychological need of the one speaking. If someone has negative thoughts about you, why not just say it to your face? Why take the indirect route, the whispers, the side comments, the conversations in absence? Psychologically, direct confrontation carries risk. It risks conflict, it risks being challenged, it risks exposing one's own motives. For many habitual gossipers, the issue isn't only what they think, it's how safe they feel expressing it openly. Speaking behind someone's back allows them to release judgment without facing emotional consequences. No pushback, no accountability, no uncomfortable dialogue. There's also an audience factor. Gossip often needs listeners. Direct confrontation is private and contained. Gossip is social. It recruits validation, nods, agreement, shared reactions. Those responses reinforce the speaker's stance and soothe doubt. So instead of saying, "I feel threatened by you," or "I'm insecure around you," or even "I'm upset," the emotion is rerouted. It travels sideways, through other people, where it feels safer. In psychology, this is called indirect aggression, expressing hostility in ways that avoid direct engagement. And that's why many who speak the most about others speak the least to them. For a behavior to repeat, it has to reward the person doing it, even if only briefly. And one reason gossip can become habitual is that in the moment, it often feels good. When someone talks critically about another person who isn't present, several psychological rewards can activate at once. First, there's a sense of elevation. By pointing out someone else's flaws or shortcomings, the speaker experiences a subtle status lift. I'm not like that. This is downward comparison in action, but subjectively, it feels like reassurance. For someone with shaky self-worth, that momentary sense of being above another person can be stabilizing. Second, there's social bonding. If the listener agrees, laughs, or adds their own comment, an alliance forms. Shared judgment creates a quick feeling of closeness. We see it the same way. For individuals who crave belonging or attention, this kind of interaction can feel connecting, even if the connection is shallow. Third, there's moral positioning. Gossip often carries an evaluative tone. Who's authentic, who's fake, who's respectable, who isn't. By placing themselves on the judging side, the speaker experiences a fleeting sense of authority or moral clarity. These rewards are small and temporary, but they're reinforcing. So the pattern becomes cyclical. Discomfort, comparison, gossip, relief. And over time, talking behind others' backs becomes less about any specific person and more about maintaining these quick psychological lifts. When someone repeatedly talks behind others' backs, it's natural to focus on the content, what they said, how harsh it was, whether it's true. But psychologically, the more revealing information isn't the specific comment, it's the pattern. Because consistent gossip tells you something about how a person regulates self-worth, status, and relationships. Frequent backtalk often reflects a comparison-based identity, a sense of self that depends on where one stands relative to others. Instead of feeling secure internally, the person tracks social position constantly. Who's ahead, who's behind, who's admired, who's flawed. In that framework, discussing others becomes a way to manage one's own place in the hierarchy. It can also signal envy sensitivity, a heightened awareness of others' advantages or visibility. When someone repeatedly notices, critiques, or minimizes what others have, it often indicates discomfort with comparison rather than objective evaluation. And over time, habitual gossip reveals a relational style built on triangulation. Rather than addressing feelings directly with the person involved, the individual processes those feelings through a third party. This creates indirect alliances and distance instead of clarity. None of this automatically makes someone malicious. Many people who gossip are unaware of the psychological needs driving it. But when the behavior is chronic, you're seeing more than opinion. You're seeing how that person stabilizes self-image, navigates status, and manages insecurity in relationships. When you start to understand the psychology behind why some people talk behind others' backs, something important begins to shift. The behavior stops feeling like a verdict on your worth and starts looking like a reflection of their inner dynamics, their insecurity, their comparison, their need to position themselves socially. Those processes belong to them, not to you. And this distinction matters because repeated gossip can easily become internalized. You hear something enough times, even indirectly, and it can start to echo inside your own self-perception. Doubt creeps in. You begin to question how others see you. You adjust yourself around a narrative you never created. Understanding breaks that loop. It doesn't mean you excuse the behavior. It means you stop absorbing it as identity. You recognize that someone else's pattern of diminishing others is not reliable data about who you are. It's information about how they regulate themselves. So when you encounter gossip, the goal isn't denial or defensiveness. It's clarity without internalization. If this exploration helped you see the dynamics of gossip more clearly, consider subscribing. This channel is dedicated to understanding the hidden patterns behind human behavior. And if you've experienced chronic gossip or witnessed it up close, share your perspective in the comments. Your experience may help someone else make sense of theirs. Thank you for watching.